Good afternoon. I'm hoping to start, I mentioned that I was going to build a router plane from the Paul Sellers kit in my last video. And just for clarity's sake here is the kit, which includes the adjustment knobs, the iron, and the hold down bar, and the assorted washers. I'm hoping to start that project this weekend. So I'm guessing that I will use a spokeshave to do some of the final shaping, probably at least. So I do want to sharpen my spokeshave iron, and these can be a little tricky if you've never sharpened them before, only because they're so small that it's really difficult to get your hands in there to register it and keep it at a steady angle. So what I do, I tape it with just your typical blue painter's tape to a board. And I can't claim that I invented this. I've seen other people do it, but this is I've seen people make holders with clamps, and sometimes they even use the hardware, the hold down from this spokeshave. This is a Stanley spokeshave, number 63. It's an old one that I actually found. I don't think you need to go through that much trouble. The blue tape really is strong enough, unless you're really just bearing down on this. What I generally do is I register it on it's really important to have a nice straight board. So I register the iron against that one side. The side I know is 90 degrees to the front, and I tape it down with a few pieces of tape. Make sure it's snug, and I really wrap it up nice and tight. But what this allows me to do is to use the board as almost like leverage, and it's much easier to keep the bevel steady and straight like this than it would be trying to use your hands. And it's, as I said, I don't have giant hands, but they're not small. And even if I had smaller hands, there's very few people whose hands are tiny enough to register a blade of this size, an iron of this size, and keep it steady enough to where you're going to get a nice smooth and straight bevel angle. So I'm going to use the diamond plate again. As I said before, I don't often use diamond plates to sharpen, as in very rarely, but in this case I want to really quickly raise a bar. And I know I generally, this spokeshave I don't use often, as I have a Veritas spokeshave that is a really nice quality one, that when I do use a spokeshave, which is not a common tool for me to use, to be honest, but here's the one I use. It's a really nice tool, but I want to use this one only because it has it is a rounded sole, if you want to call it a sole. So we're going to do the same thing that we normally do with any type of beveled woodworking tool. We're going to register it, lift, and go back and forth. Now I am putting good pressure on this. I'm not being light. It's just with the tape, you don't want to really bear down it too hard. Let the stone, or in this case the diamond plate, do all the work. And no bar yet. I know this tool hasn't been used in a very long time, to be honest, and probably hasn't been sharpened in several years. Starting to get a bar. Start lift. What's nice with the board is it really it really helps you keep it steady. This is easier than sharpening a chisel by hand, because you have so much leverage here that it's really hard to mess up your angle. Bar is forming, but it's not there yet. So I get some more of the window cleaner back there. Bar is almost all the way across. It's very light. I prefer one that's a bit heavier than this. I can't find my cloth. Here it is. And we do have a bar all the way across. So I'm going to remove the bar with the water soon, because this is polished already. Bar is gone. I'll go to the next grit, the finer grit. I'll just lift. With this board, I can sort of lock it into my wrist there. When I register it, lift it, I can bend my wrist down, and that pretty much keeps it steady. What I would recommend, if you want to make a more permanent version of this, is firstly have a board that is the exact width of your particular spokeshave iron. Secondly, I would probably make a little recess for the iron to sit in, and that way when it's just flush with the rest of the board, so it sits flush. That way when you tape it down, it really isn't going to go anywhere. A little bit more on there. As I said, I've seen woodworkers make similar little jigs for sharpening these. I did this one day basically out of necessity, because I was making a project for my daughter for school several years back, and at the time I did not have a Veritas spokeshave. I had an old Stanley one that my stepdad had let me borrow, and it was really dull, and I was struggling to get it sharp. Almost there. Get more of the liquid there. bar is almost all the way. It is all the way across, but it's a little light on the left, my left side here. And that was good. Remove this for now. Go onto the water stone. I'll remove the bar first. Register it. I'll say one thing, I'm usually a fan of the older tool steel in most regards, but some of the older Stanley spokeshaves I've come across, I'm not a big fan of. And I see this, almost gouged my stone there. It was my fault, I slipped. The Veritas iron sharpens up much more quickly than any of the older Stanleys I've come across. This one in particular is a pretty popular model. This number 63. See, it has it's taped over now, but it has the Sweetheart logo on it. And it was one of their more popular spokeshaves, but for whatever reason, it seems like sharpening it has not been easy. Almost all the way across. When I say that, there is a bar all the way across, but it's not as even as I like. I like to feel it pretty much the same touch all the way across. With your fingers, you can tell pretty easy. You really can't see it. Polish looks really nice. A little bit more should do it. That feels good. And like usual, I will use the leather strap in this. My desk is a little bit cleaner, but or bench, I mean, it's a little bit cleaner, but I'm not going to bother sliding the camera over. We recently did somewhat of a bathroom remodel, so I had all kinds of things floating around on this bench. So I cut the tape off. Let's see what we have. This is a really, really simple tool. One of the simplest. I made one from a kit a few years ago. It actually works pretty well. Better if my own fingers worked. Being arthritic, it's not fun. I'm sure it's going to get worse as I get older. I have a piece of walnut here. I'm going to be making a plane out of walnut. The router plane, I mean. So I figured it'd be good to try on this. One thing I never was great at is adjusting this. It doesn't really have an adjustment mechanism on it. You can tap it with a hammer. And that really did nothing. Give it a little light tap. Tighten it back up. Okay, there we go. We're getting really, these are super, super fine shavings. See if I can set it a little thicker. That would be, those shavings would be too fine to work. It would take forever to remove material. Usually I recommend doing one side heavy, one side light on these. So it's once again, it's taking very super thin shavings, thinner than I'd like actually. See if I can adjust this without making them too thick. There's a really fine line. Going against the green. So yeah, that will work. I would like to do it a little thicker, but I could work with this no problem. If I needed to do a round over, make it take off a little bit of a heavier shaving or lighten it up. This here, this one has adjusting knobs, which make it a lot easier to use. Sorry for my back. Just trying to see what we have here. This obviously needs to be sharpened too. It's actually really dull. Another tool I haven't really used in quite a while. But this will work. This will do what I need it to do. Hopefully on Saturday or Sunday I'm going to start. This board's not all that great either. It's a little cut off, and the green is sort of running really wonky. These spokeshaves with a rounded bottom require a little bit more touch than the spokeshave that's flat. Or you could push it away from you. I prefer going in, but also going against the grain, they're really, really bad. So there's sort of like a round over. Once again, I just use my back. I was doing a little adjustment. I'm doing this on the fly. There are no camera tricks in my videos, trust me. I wouldn't know how to add them if I wanted to. Let's see if I can smooth this up a little bit. The cut was a touch rough. Not as bad as I thought it was going to be, really. This is a much finer shaving now. That you can see that actually has a nice sheen to it. It's still a little rough in the sense that you can see some of the planing marks, but it is smooth to the touch. Quite smooth, actually. So yeah, if you're having issues sharpening a spokeshave, this little board and tape trick actually does the job. As I said, the best, in my opinion, the best way to sharpen with this is you rip this board to the exact size of your iron, and see if you can recess it in there just so it would be flush with your board face. That will help keep your iron steady, and it will make sharpening go a little quicker. With a spokeshave iron, you don't need. And now, before I say this, see if you can see this. I had a piece of paper here, sort of so you could. Trying to block the overhead light from reflecting. There you go. That's not too bad. You can see that that's a pretty even polishing marks all the way across. There's no diagonals or areas where it's high or low. So that, as you watch the video, you can tell I did nothing special. I was just sharpening like I would normally sharpen a chisel. But this will work in a pinch, and you can make a more permanent version of this, and I probably maybe 30 minutes, even fitting, if you want to fit the back end of it to make more of a proper handle rather than just, you know, you're gripping you're gripping the hard edges, especially oak. This is home center oak, which I always say is one of the hardest woods you'll ever find outside of a lumber yard. You can quite easily cut your finger if you rub it across this quickly enough. So I would probably recommend using a softer wood too, and only because firstly it's easier to shape if you want to shape it, and secondly it has a better feel to it than this like oak. I pulled this off the shelf because it was pretty much the same size as my spokeshave iron. I have no affinity for using this particular wood for holding a spokeshave blade to sharpen. But yeah, give this a try. It will work for most people, and it's the same as every other thing. With a little bit of practice and sharpening by hand, little jigs like this will really using them will be like second nature. And they do work, and it's really cheap. I know that there's some companies out there, they make holders for spokeshave special attachments, and I think they're quite expensive. I've never really bothered to look, but I know from what I understand they're not cheap, and I don't really think they're necessary unless, once again, you're a professional and you're sharpening and you're using spokeshaves consistently and sharpening them all the time. Then maybe you do want to get a more permanent jig. But if you're like me, you're an amateur woodworker who maybe does one or two projects, if you're lucky, every 6 months, maybe 3 projects a year, and you're not using a spokeshave too often, there's no need to go out and buy all these fancy jigs. You just don't really need them. A board, some tape, or even you could screw it down to it too if you like. That will do just fine. So I hope this helps, and thanks, and have a great night.